Hello everyone, welcome to Sharmit. In this session, we are going to discuss about another few very important medical terminology related suffixes that comes with medical terminology, and from there it provides some information. So if you remember, in our previous session also we discussed about some suffixes, prefixes, right? So this session is in the continuation of the same, where we are going to learn more about the suffixes and their uses. But before we proceed further, I would like to recommend you to please go and check out the previously released sessions first, because they all are in proper sequence and sync. So if you follow them sequentially, then it would be much more easier for you to understand the ongoing topic, because for time being we are just mainly focusing on how to use medical terminology suffixes. Okay. Alright, so now we are going to proceed in the very similar way. Firstly, we will talk about what is suffix. Maybe some of you are not aware of this terminology, so I'll explain you what is suffix, and then later on one by one we will see all these examples like centesis, desis, ectomy, graph and graphy. So these are the all suffixes that we will be learning in this session. Okay. So I'll explain you the meaning, as well as we will discuss some examples of it, because I'm sure like you are preparing for some exams and interviews. So there, if someone asks you to identify the meaning of particular terminology, so there you need to you need the knowledge of suffixes, so that you can easily relate the things and you can find out the actual meaning. Okay. Alright, so let's get started. The first thing is, what is suffix? So if someone asks you what is suffix, so in a very simple term you can say that suffix are the words that attached at the end of any medical terminology, and from there it provides some information. Okay, information could be anything. It could relate something related to color or procedure, anything. So that comes as a suffix. So in short, we in medical coding, medical terminology, we have multiple things that combine together to form a complete medical terminology, like prefix, then we have connecting word, root word and suffixes. Okay, so currently we are focusing on the suffixes. Alright, so let's see the first suffix. For today, the first suffix is centesis. Centesis means surgical puncture to remove the fluid. So if any medical procedure, if a doctor surgically puncture a part of a body to remove the fluid, so in that case what we will do, we will use the terminology with suffix centesis. For example, here you can see amniocentesis. Amniocentesis means surgical puncture of an amniotic sac to remove the fluid for testing purpose. Okay, so if for any diagnosis purpose, if a doctor performs a surgical puncture of a amniotic sac to remove the fluid for testing, then that terminology is called amniocentesis, where you can see the centesis is attached at the end of the word, and from there it is providing the information that it is something related to surgical puncture to remove the fluid. So complete terminology is amniocentesis, and the suffix that we are using here is centesis. Clear? Next example is paracentesis. Paracentesis means removal of the fluid from the abdominal cavity, often in cases of ascites. Okay, so again here you can see the process is related to the removal of fluid through puncture, so that is why we are using the suffix that is centesis. So here we discuss two examples for centesis suffix, which is amniocentesis and paracentesis. Likewise, there are other terminologies also, and remember one thing, in terminologies there are alternatives available, there are exceptions available. So don't think that these are the only two. There are other multiple suffixes that we use to denote similar kind of information, but here we learn about one process where we are talking about the surgical puncture to remove the fluid, and in such situation we are using the suffix as centesis. And we discussed the example, that is amniocentesis, where we are removing the fluid from the amniotic sac to remove the fluid, and then we have paracentesis, where we are removing the fluid from the abdominal cavity. Next example is desis. Next suffix is desis, which means surgical binding or fixation. So to understand this thing, let's see the example. The first example is arthrodesis. Arthrodesis means surgical fusion of a joint to prevent the movement. An example is severe arthritis. So if a patient is suffering from arthritis, so they then in that case doctor can perform some operation, that is surgical fusion of joint to prevent the movement. And in this situation we are talking about something related to surgical binding or fixation. So in that situations where we are talking about surgical binding and fixation, we use the suffix that is desis, desis, like arthrodesis. Likewise we have tenodesis, which means surgical fixation of a tendon to bone. So again here we are talking about something related to surgical fixation or binding, and that is the reason we are using the terminology tenodesis. So tenodesis is complete medical terminology where desis is the suffix. Clear? So far we have discussed two suffixes. One is centesis, that is used to denote something related to surgical puncture to remove the fluid, and the another one is desis, which is for surgical binding or fixation. Alright, so let's move to the next slide where we have another few important suffix, that is ectomy. And this is something that you might have heard lots of time, because this is one of the most popular suffix we saw in medical terminology area, that is ectomy. Ectomy means something related to cutout or removal. So through any medical procedure or operation, if the doctors are removing a part of a body or a part of any particle, so in that case we will call it we will use this terminology. For example, appendectomy. Appendectomy means surgical removal of the appendix. So if a person is suffering from appendix, so in that case what doctors will do, they will perform a surgical operation where they surgically remove the part where they surgically remove the appendix. So in this situation, the terminology suffix that we are using here is ectomy, which is providing the information that it is something related to cutout or removal. Okay. Likewise we have tonsillectomy. Tonsillectomy means surgical removal of the tonsils. So again, if a person or a patient is suffering from a tonsils and doctors perform some surgical operation to remove the part of tonsil, then in that case what we will do, we will use the terminology tonsillectomy, and here we are using the suffix that is ectomy. So for ectomy, it is clear that it is again it is related to the cutout or removal process through surgical operations, and the examples are for ectomy is appendectomy and tonsillectomy. Now the next suffix is gram. So whenever there is a suffix present in the end as gram, that is related to picture or record. For example, electrocardiogram, which is ECG or EKG, a record of the electrical activity of the heart. So if a person or a patient is suffering from some heart disease, so doctor performs some kind of diagnosis through electrocardiogram, and in this electrocardiogram that suffix gram is denoting that it is related to something record or picture. Likewise we have angiogram, an imaging record of blood vessel using contrast dye. The process is bit different, but again we are recording or picturing the scenarios by diagnosing the patient. Clear? Now here we talked about record and picture, that is and for that we are using the gram suffix. Likewise we have alternatives also, as I mentioned. Then in medical coding or in science, like you will find so many alternatives and exceptions also. So let's see the alternative, that is graph. Although it is bit different, but somewhere like it is related to creating the pictures and record. So graph means instrument used to record or picture. So here we are talking about particularly to the equipment or instrument. Okay, like electrocardiograph, which is instrument that record the electrical activity of the heart. So in the previous electrocardiogram example, we talked about the gram, that is talking about something related to record and picture, and here we are talking about that instrument that is used to record that record and picture, that is electrocardiograph. Likewise, we have sonograph. Sonograph means instrument that uses ultrasound to create images of internal body structure. Okay. The next one is graphy. Graphy means process of recording or imaging. So again we are talking about recording and imaging for the diagnosis, that is angiography, imaging of blood vessels using contrast dye, and radiography, where the process of taking X-ray images. Clear? So yeah, these are the all suffixes which I would like to share with you all in this particular session. Now for practice purpose, there is one question for all of you, and the question is, why do we use suffix ptosis? Okay, so if you know the answer of this question, please do share your knowledge in the comment section so that others can take a reference from it. If in case you are not you don't know the meaning of this suffix, so that is fine. In our previous session we discussed about this suffix in detailed manner, so you can simply refer that session, and after clearing your concept you can share your knowledge in the comment section. Okay, so I'm sure like most of you are preparing for interviews and exams, so by answering these questions time to time, you will be it will help you to remember the concepts for the longer way. Okay, so yeah, that's all for today. See you in the next session with new topics. So thank you for watching Tech Sharmit.